Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakened power of the Red Dragon Emperor and fell in love with Rias Gremory? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Echo of the Dragon. The world was breaking under the weight of a god. Trees, ancient and vast, splintered like twigs, their dying groans lost in the sand-choked roar that tore the sky apart. Naruto Uzumaki, his orange jacket shredded and his body a canvas of deep cuts and deeper bruises, skidded through the churning dirt, his sandals digging trenches in the forest floor. He slammed a hand down, arresting his momentum, and coughed, the taste of blood and grit coating his tongue. Across the clearing, the beast was still growing. Gaara was gone, submerged somewhere within the colossal hefting monument of sand that wore the crazed, leering face of the one-tailed Shukaku. It was a monster of pure, unrestrained hatred, and its voice was a gale that ripped leaves from their branches. "I'll kill you, I'll crush you, I'll erase every trace of you, Uzumaki Naruto. You'll have to try harder," Naruto rasped, forcing himself to his feet. His legs screamed in protest. Every muscle fiber felt like it was being held over a flame. "Kit," a voice like a rumbling earthquake echoed in the depths of his mind. "This is it. There's nothing left. We give it all, or we die." Kurama's presence was a furnace at his back, a desperate, final surge of crimson chakra bubbling to the surface, healing the worst of his wounds but doing nothing for the bone-deep exhaustion. He didn't need the fox to tell him this was the end of the line. He had summoned Gamabunta, fought, and been thrown aside. He had used clone after clone, only to see them shredded by claws of condensed sand. Now, there was only him. "Just a little more," Naruto muttered, his hand flashing through seals that felt clumsy and slow. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Two clones flickered into existence beside him. They were pale, their forms wavering like heat haze. It was all he had left. The originals of his Rasengan training. He held out his right hand, and the clones immediately grabbed his wrist and forearm, pouring their meager chakra into his palm. A familiar, violent swirl of blue energy began to churn, but it was weak, unstable. Shukaku lumbered forward, its single massive tail sweeping a wide arc that pulverized the ground. "That trick again. I'll swallow it whole." The monster opened its maw, a vortex of sand and malevolent chakra forming within. It was a race, a pathetic, sputtering sphere of blue against a hurricane of divine fury. Naruto pushed, grit his teeth, pouring the last dregs of his own will into the attack. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The sand blast erupted from Shukaku's mouth. It wasn't a projectile, it was an erasure. The world dissolved in its path. Naruto's clones, fragile as they were, disintegrated instantly. The Rasengan in his hand sputtered and died. The roar of the attack was the last thing he heard before the world turned into a storm of agonizing pain. He was thrown backward, tumbling through the air like a discarded doll. He felt ribs snap, his arm bend at an angle it wasn't meant to. He crashed through the trunk of a tree that might have stood for centuries, the impact driving the air from his lungs in a single, final gasp. He landed in a heap, his vision flickering. The world fading to a muted gray. So this was it. He'd failed. He couldn't even save one person. Couldn't stop one monster. He thought of Sakura, of Sasuke, of the old man Hokage. He thought of the glares, the whispers, the loneliness that had been a constant companion his entire life. He had fought so hard, so damn hard, just to be seen. Just to be acknowledged. And for what? To die alone in a broken forest. Torn apart by a beast just as lonely as he was. Shukaku's massive form blotted out the sky above him, a victorious silhouette against the pale moon. A colossal claw of sand, sharpened to a spear point, descended. There was no malice in it, only the final, indifferent punctuation to his failure. No, Kurama's roar was no longer just in his mind. It was a physical force, a final, defiant eruption from the seal on his stomach. Red chakra, thick and vile, poured from him, not to heal, but to destroy. It was a last act of spite against a world that had caged them both. But it was too late. The claw descended. Death was inches away, and in that space between one heartbeat and the next, something answered. It wasn't Kurama. It was something else. Something ancient, slumbering, and impossibly vast. It was an echo from a time before chakra, before shinobi, before the world as he knew it even existed. A power forged in the dreams of dragons, born of domination and will. A searing, unimaginable pain shot through his left arm. It felt as if his very bones were being melted and reshaped. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound lost in the din of Shukaku's final attack. A light, crimson and brilliant, exploded from his limb, so bright it burned away the shadows. Intricate red and gold plating, like the scales of some mythical beast, crawled up his skin, wrapping around his hand and forearm. A brilliant green jewel pulsed to life on the back of his hand, glowing with a light that seemed to drink in the very air around it. The transformation completed in a flash, settling into the form of a heavy, draconic gauntlet. It felt right, like a missing piece of his soul had just slammed back into place. Then, a voice, deep and resonant, 1,000 times more powerful than Kurama's, spoke, not in his mind, but to the world itself. Open black lens bracket boost. Close black lens bracket. The effect was instantaneous. Power, raw and untamed, flooded Naruto's system. It wasn't like Kurama's chakra, which was a violent, hateful torrent. This was different. It was a clean, overwhelming surge of pure energy, a geometric expansion of his own life force. He felt his snapping bones mend, his torn muscles knit back together. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a strength so immense it felt like he could shatter the planet beneath his feet. The descending sand spear was a foot from his face. Time seemed to crawl. He saw every grain, every swirl of wind-infused chakra. Without thinking, without a plan, his left hand, now encased in the crimson gauntlet, shot up. He didn't form a fist to punch. He simply met the attack with an open palm. There was no titanic explosion. No grand struggle. The moment his gauntlet touched the tip of the sand spear, the attack just ended. The chakra holding it together was annihilated. The compressed sand, robbed of its binding force, simply fell apart, cascading harmlessly around him like fine dust. Shukaku froze. Its crazed eyes widened in something that looked shockingly like fear. Naruto was on his feet. Though he didn't remember standing. He stared at his left arm, at the impossible piece of armor that was now a part of him. The green jewel on the back of his hand glowed, and the voice echoed again. A low, guttural thrum that vibrated in his very soul. Open black lens bracket boost. Close black lens bracket. Another wave of power, doubling the first. It was intoxicating. He could feel the world around him, not just with his senses, but with an innate understanding of its energy. He could feel the life in the trees, the power in Shukaku, the fading chakra of the shinobi rushing towards the battlefield. He looked up at the sand demon. And for the first time, he wasn't looking at an unstoppable god. He was looking at a target. He took a step, and the ground cracked under his foot. He took another, and then he was moving. A blur of orange and red. He didn't need a jutsu. He didn't need a strategy. He just needed to hit it. He leapt, a single bound carrying him hundreds of feet into the air, bringing him level with Shukaku's horrified face. He pulled his right arm back, not his left. Kurama's chakra, instinctively drawn to the new power, swirled around his fist, forming a claw of raw red energy. Open black lens bracket boost. Boost, 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 boost. Close black lens bracket. The voice in the gauntlet became a rapid-fire drumbeat, each word a new layer of impossible power. The world seemed to bend around him. He threw the punch. His chalk, raw shrouded fist connected with Shukaku's jaw. The result was a cataclysm. Sound arrived a moment after the impact. A deafening crack that wasn't a roar or an explosion, but the sound of reality itself tearing. The sand beast's head snapped back, but it didn't just recoil. It disintegrated. The shockwave of the blow traveled through its colossal body, and the entire construct, a mountain of sand held together by the tailed beast's power, simply ceased to be. It vaporized, turning into a cloud of superheated dust that expanded outward in a perfect, silent sphere. The shockwave hit the forest next. Trees were not knocked over. They were atomized. The ground was scoured clean in a wave of force that carved a massive, glassy crater into the earth. The very air burned. Naruto landed lightly in the center of the newly formed wasteland, his legs barely bending. The crimson gauntlet on his arm pulsed one last time before dissolving into motes of red light, leaving behind nothing but a faint, tattoo-like mark on the back of his hand. He swayed, the sudden absence of that immense power leaving him feeling hollow and weak. Across the crater, Gaara lay unconscious on the scorched earth, his own body bloody and broken. The sand that once protected him now inert. The silence that followed was absolute. It was broken by the sound of dozens of shinobi landing on the crater's edge. Hiruzen Sarutobi was at the forefront, his old face etched with a mixture of awe and profound horror. Beside him, his former teammates, Homura and Kaharu, looked at Naruto with open, undisguised terror. But it was the gaze of Danzo Shimura that cut the deepest. His one visible eye wasn't afraid. It was sharp, calculating, filled with a chillingly familiar glint of avarice. It was the look a blacksmith gave a piece of raw, untamed steel. The look of someone who saw not a boy, but a weapon that had just revealed a terrifying and valuable new feature. Root Anbu, their blank, animal-like masks hiding any emotion, flickered into existence around Danzo, their hands already moving towards the seals on their pouches. They weren't here to help. They were here to contain. Naruto. Hiruzen began, his voice strained. What was that? Naruto couldn't answer. He stared at his left hand, flexing his fingers. It felt normal, but he could still feel the phantom weight of the gauntlet, hear the echo of that powerful voice. He had won. He had saved everyone. But as he looked at the faces of the village elders, at the Anbu poised to strike, he had never felt more alone. The victory felt like ash in his mouth. They didn't see a hero. They saw a monster who had just learned a new, more destructive trick. Just as Danzo gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod to his men, the air changed. A pressure descended on the crater, heavy and ancient, making the air thick and hard to breathe. It wasn't chakra, it was something else, something regal and impossibly dense. A circle of crimson light, filled with intricate, swirling patterns, bloomed on the ground a few feet from Naruto. It pulsed with a soft hum, casting an otherworldly glow on the scorched earth. The shinobi tensed, kunai and shuriken appearing in their hands, but they hesitated. Their instincts screaming at them that this was a power far beyond their comprehension. From the center of the light, figures emerged. The first was a young woman of stunning beauty, with long, crimson hair that seemed to absorb the light and eyes the color of a clear blue sky. She wore a strange uniform, but carried herself with the unshakable confidence of royalty. Her gaze swept over the scene of utter devastation, passed over the stunned shinobi, and landed on Naruto. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but with a brilliant, predatory light of discovery and awe. Behind her stood her retinue. A graceful woman with black hair and a dangerously alluring smile. A handsome young man with blonde hair and a gentle, knightly demeanor. And a small, white-haired girl who watched everything with an unnerving, stoic calm. The crimson-haired woman ignored the Hokage and his council as if they were nothing more than part of the scenery. She walked forward, her heels clicking softly on the glassy ground, her every step radiating an authority that dwarfed everyone present. She stopped directly in front of Naruto, her eyes fixed on the faint mark on the back of his left hand. Incredible, she breathed, her voice a melody that cut through the tension. To think we would find it here. The raw, untamed echo of a dragon god. I've never felt anything like it. Danzo stepped forward, his voice a low growl. Identify yourselves. You are trespassing in the land of fire, on the territory of Konohagakure. The woman didn't even glance at him. Her full attention remained on Naruto. They're afraid of you, she said, her voice soft but clear enough for all to hear. She gestured with a graceful hand to the council, to the poised Anbu. They saw you save them, and their first thought was how to chain you. They see a weapon that needs to be controlled, a beast that needs a stronger cage. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in his life, Naruto saw no fear, no hatred, no calculation. He saw understanding, and something more, ambition. I see power, she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I see a king who doesn't know the worth of his own crown. My name is Rias Gremory. She extended a pale, elegant hand. Your life here is over. You know it. Stay, and they will spend the rest of your days trying to understand what you are, trying to control you. And when they fail, they will dispose of you. Or, you can come with me. The Jinchuriki belongs to Konoha, Danzo snarled, taking another step. He will not be going anywhere. Rias finally turned her head, fixing Danzo with a look of bored contempt. She flicked her wrist, and a small, crimson sphere of energy, swirling with black lightning, appeared in her palm. With a casual motion, she tossed it towards a massive, half-melted boulder at the crater's edge. The sphere touched the rock and, without a sound, without an explosion, the boulder simply ceased to exist. Not even dust remained. It was an act of absolute annihilation. The root Anbu froze. Danzo's visible eye widened in shock. That was a power that defied all known principles of chakra. Rias turned back to Naruto, her smile serene. Come with me, Uzumaki Naruto. I will give you a world where your power isn't a curse. I'll give you purpose. I'll give you a family that won't flinch when you show your true strength. I will give you a place where you are not feared, but revered. The choice hung in the air, heavy and final. Naruto looked past Rias, at the Hokage's pained, indecisive face. He looked at the elders, terror. He looked at Danzo's cold, possessive glare. He saw his future in their eyes. A life in a reinforced cell en route, endless experiments, his body and his power dissected until there was nothing left of him. A tool to be used and discarded. The bonds he had fought and bled for felt like brittle threads in that moment, already snapping under the weight of this new, terrifying power. There was nothing for him here anymore. There never really was. He looked back at Rias Gremory. At her confident smile, her outstretched hand, and the promise in her eyes. It was a leap into an unknown, far stranger and more dangerous than anything he had ever faced. But it was a future. It was a choice. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his left hand and placed it in hers. Her grip was firm, warm. A single, decisive nod was his only answer. Rias's smile widened, a triumphant, brilliant thing. A wise decision. Behind them, the crimson magic circle flared to life again, a gateway to a world he couldn't imagine. Naruto, no, Hiruzen cried out, taking a step forward, his voice filled with desperation. But it was too late. Naruto didn't look back. With Rias Gremory at his side, he took his first step out of the elemental nations. Leaving behind a shattered forest, a defeated enemy, and a village that had just lost the one thing it could never hope to replace. He stepped into the crimson light, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a monster. He felt like he was going home. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Devil's Gambit. The transition was like stepping through a pane of cool water. One moment, Naruto was standing on the scorched, sterile ground of his former world. The next, he was enveloped in a soft, crimson light. The air grew heavy, scented with something ancient and strange, like old books, sweet wine, and the faint, electric tang of ozone. He emerged into a hall so vast it felt like it had been built for giants. Polished obsidian floors reflected the light of colossal chandeliers that dripped with crystals, each one glowing with a captured, inner fire. Soaring archways, carved with demonic visages and intricate filigree, led into shadowed corridors. The ceiling was a dome of midnight blue stone, enchanted to look like a living night sky, complete with constellations that twisted into unfamiliar, menacing shapes. It was the absolute antithesis of Konoha's practical, wooden architecture. This place was built not for function, but for power. It was a declaration of dominance etched in stone and magic. Naruto's senses, honed by years of survival, screamed at him. He was in enemy territory, surrounded by beings whose energy signatures were utterly alien. He instinctively dropped into a low, ready stance, his eyes scanning every shadow. The Gremory seal on the floor behind him faded, sealing off his only retreat. Rias Gremory watched him, a faint, amused smile playing on her lips. You can relax. You are a guest in my family's home. No one here will harm you. Her peerage fanned out around them, their own reactions a study in contrasts. The black-haired woman, Akano, regarded him with a sultry curiosity, her head tilted. Her smile was playful, but her eyes were sharp, analytical. She could feel the two immense powers warring within him, the chaotic, hateful furnace of the tailed beast, and the cleaner, more structured power of the dragon. It was a fascinating, and potentially explosive, combination. The blonde knight, Kiba, offered a small, reassuring smile. He saw past the lingering killing intent and the battle-ready posture. He saw the exhaustion in Naruto's eyes, the deep-seated wariness of someone who had never known a true safe harbor. He recognized a kindred spirit. The small, white-haired girl, Kaneko, was a bastion of stillness. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression flat, but her senses were anything but. Naruto's presence was a physical weight in the air. It was like standing next to a star, a constant, overwhelming pressure that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. She categorized him instantly. Dangerous. Where are we? Naruto asked, his voice low, not relaxing his stance in the slightest. The underworld, Rias answered simply, as if discussing the weather. Specifically, the domain of Gremory. This is my home. She began to walk, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall, and gestured for him to follow. After a moment's hesitation, he did, falling into step a few paces behind her, a position that allowed him to keep both her and her followers in his sightline. They passed through halls adorned with portraits of stern-looking individuals with crimson hair, each one radiating the same aura of aristocratic power as Rias. They entered a lavish drawing room. A fire roared in a marble hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls lined with thousands of leather-bound books. Rias settled into a high-backed velvet chair, the picture of casual grace. "Please, sit," she offered, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Naruto ignored it, choosing instead to stand near the wall, his back protected. Rias didn't press the issue. "You're probably wondering what all of this is," she began, getting straight to the point. "The world you know is only a small, walled-off garden in a much larger, more chaotic forest. For millennia, 3 major factions have vied for control: the devils, the angels, and the fallen angels. I am a devil, a pure-blooded heiress of the House of Gremory, one of the 72 pillars of the underworld." Naruto listened, his expression unreadable. He processed the information without comment. He'd seen a walking tanuki the size of a mountain. Strange worlds and magical beings weren't that much of a stretch. "What you awakened in your battle," Rias continued, her eyes fixed on his left hand, "is called a sacred gear, a divine artifact bestowed upon certain humans by the original god of the Bible. Most are minor, capable of simple tricks. But yours is one of the 13 Longinus. The boosted gear." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "It houses the soul of Didrake, the Welsh dragon, also known as the Red Dragon Emperor. His power is that of domination. His signature ability, which you've already experienced, is to double the user's power every 10 seconds. It is a power that, with enough time, can surpass the Devil Kings, and even kill gods." The pieces clicked into place. The voice, the surge of power, the crimson gauntlet. It had a name. "Okay," Naruto said, his voice cutting through her explanation. It was calm, direct. "I get it. New world, new powers. But that doesn't answer the real questions. What do you want from me? And why should I care?" Rias's smile widened. She appreciated his directness. There was no naivety here, only a sharp, pragmatic mind. "What I want is your power, Naruto Uzumaki. I want you to join my peerage." She explained the evil piece system, a concept borrowed from chess. A high-class devil like her was granted a set of pieces, a queen, rooks, knights, bishops, and pawns, which could be used to reincarnate other beings as devils in their service. Akeno was her queen, Kaneko her rook, Hiba her knight. "In exchange for your service," Rias explained, "you receive a new life. Immense power. The protection of my family's name. You would never have to worry about being hunted or caged again." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. "Service." The word landed like a stone. "What kind of service?" "My peerage and I handle the affairs of the Gremory family in the human world," Akeno chimed in, her voice a seductive purr. "A key part of which involves making contracts with humans. They summon us, make a wish, and we grant it in exchange for a price." "What price?" Naruto asked, his gaze shifting to her. "It varies," Akeno said with a shrug. "Money, prized possessions, sometimes, their souls." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Naruto's posture, which had relaxed fractionally, went rigid again. The easy-going mask he sometimes wore was gone, replaced by a cold stillness that was far more menacing. "You enslave people," he stated. It wasn't a question. It's a transaction, Rias corrected, her tone firm but not defensive. A mutually agreed upon deal. We offer them things they could never achieve on their own: wealth, fame, revenge. They are fully aware of the cost. People who are desperate will agree to anything. Naruto shot back, his voice dangerously low. You prey on them when they're at their weakest. You're no better than loan sharks, promising a quick fix and taking everything they have in the end. How is that different from a village that promises you protection but brands you a monster to be used as a weapon? The accusation hung in the air, sharp and pointed. Kiba shifted uncomfortably. Akino's smile lost some of its warmth. Rias met his glare without flinching. Her blue eyes were like ice. The world is not a kind place, Naruto. Not yours, and not mine. Power is the only currency that matters. Those without it are destined to be crushed. We offer them a chance to wield power they could never have dreamed of. Is that so wrong? It is when the price is their freedom, he growled. He shook his head, a look of profound disgust on his face. I didn't leave one cage just to become the guard for another. An impasse. Rias could see the conviction in his eyes. He wouldn't be swayed by words or promises of power. He was a creature of action and principle, forged in a world where betrayal was commonplace. He needed to see. She stood up, her expression shifting from that of a noble to a commander. Very well. Words are clearly not enough. An hour ago, one of my family's former servants went rogue. He has become a stray devil, a mindless beast that now hunts humans in the mortal world for sustenance. I was planning on having my peerage handle it. But now, you will accompany us. You will see what we do, and you will understand why we do it. The change in scenery was just as jarring as the first. One moment they were in the opulent Gremory estate, the next they stood on the rain-slicked roof of an abandoned warehouse district in a city that pulsed with a life wholly different from Konoha. Towers of glass and steel pierced the night sky, their lights painting the low-hanging clouds in hues of orange and gray. The roar of strange, horseless carriages filled the air. Kuo Town, Japan, Rias said, her red hair whipping in the wind. My territory. Akino, Kiba, and Kaneko were already in their combat attire. Kiba held a sleek European sword, and Ko's fists were covered in heavy gauntlets. Black, leathery wings erupted from Rias's and Akino's backs, a sight that Naruto noted with detached curiosity. The stray is in that central warehouse, Kiba reported, pointing. Its energy is foul, unstable. All right, Rias said, turning to her peerage. Kiba, you'll lead the initial assault. Kaneko, back him up and watch for structural weaknesses. Akino, provide support from the air. I'll wait. All eyes turned to Naruto. He hadn't moved, his hands shoved in his pockets, his orange jacket a stark slash of color against the grimy rooftop. He was staring intently at the target building, his eyes narrowed, his head tilted as if listening to something they couldn't hear. What is it? Rias asked, a hint of impatience in her tone. You're going to just walk in the front door? Naruto asked, incredulous. You're just going to announce yourselves and pick a fight. That is generally how it's done. Yes, Akino replied with a smile. A direct application of overwhelming force. Naruto scoffed. That's not a strategy. That's arrogance. You don't know what it is, what it can do, or what traps it's laid. You're fighting blind. Before any of them could respond, he flashed through a single hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 4 perfect copies of him appeared in puffs of smoke. Rias's peerage stared, startled. The clones were solid, each radiating the same energy as the original. 2 of you, circle the perimeter. I want to know every entrance and exit, the original Naruto commanded. You 2, get on the opposite roof. Find a vantage point. Look for any weaknesses in the structure itself. Go. The clones nodded and vanished, moving with a silent, fluid grace that was utterly alien to the devils. Rias watched them go, her eyes wide with surprise. This wasn't the berserker who had leveled the forest. This was a commander, a strategist. Less than a minute later, the information came back, not through words, but through the shared consciousness of the clones. Naruto's eyes unfocused for a second before snapping back to the present. Okay, he said, his tone all business. It's alone, nesting on the 3rd floor. There are 2 main entrances. But there's a rusted-out ventilation shaft on the western wall. The whole place is a death trap, full of rotting floors and corroded support beams. He turned to them, his gaze sharp. "Here's what we do, night guy, Kiba," he supplied. "Kiba, you and I are going in through the front. We make a lot of noise. We draw its attention. White hair, Kaneko. Kaneko, you go in through the back. When it's focused on us, you bring that entire third floor down on its head. Akano, you're our insurance. If it flies or tries to escape, you fry it. Rias, you're the cannon. If Kaneko's attack doesn't finish it, you end it." The plan was simple, brutal, and efficient. It used all of their strengths while minimizing their risk. Rias found herself nodding in agreement before she even realized it. She was the king in this arrangement, but in that moment, he was the one directing the pieces. "Let's go," Naruto said, and vaulted off the roof, landing silently in the alley below. The inside of the warehouse was a cavern of rust and shadows. The stray devil was a horror. It had once been humanoid, but now its limbs were elongated and twisted, its skin was a mottled gray, and a set of cheetah noose insectoid wings sprouted from its back. It shrieked when Naruto and Kiba kicked the main doors off their hinges, its voice a grating sound of nails on slate. It lunged. Kiba met it head-on, his sword a blur of silver light. He was impossibly fast, his movements elegant and precise. But the stray was strong, its claws screeching against his blade. Naruto didn't engage directly. He moved around the periphery. A phantom of orange and black. He threw a handful of kunai, not at the stray, but at the chains holding a suspended cargo container above it. The stray was forced to dodge, giving Kiba an opening. This was their fight, fast and loud, the perfect distraction. High above, Kaneko stood on a crossbeam, her eyes fixed on the battle below. She planted her feet, took a deep breath, and slammed her fists into the beam. The sound wasn't loud, just a dull, sickening crunch of stressed metal. Cracks spider webbed across the ceiling. The stray, sensing the danger, shrieked and tried to disengage, but Naruto was suddenly there. Blocking its path. He didn't attack, he just stood there, a defiant smirk on his face. With a final, deafening groan, the entire third floor gave way. Tons of rotting wood, rusted steel, and broken concrete rained down. The stray looked up, its monstrous face a mask of terror, just before it was buried. A cloud of dust and debris filled the warehouse. For a moment, there was silence. "Is it over?" Kiba asked, breathing heavily. A furious screech answered him. The pile of rubble exploded outward as the stray, battered but very much alive, clawed its way out. Its wings were shredded. One arm was bent at a sickening angle, but it was filled with a mad, desperate fury. It ignored Kiba, its multifaceted eyes locking onto Naruto. It saw him as the architect of its pain. It charged, far faster than anything so injured should have been able to move. Naruto didn't flinch. He brought his hands together, a familiar swirl of blue chakra spinning to life in his palm. The Rasengan. But as he prepared to meet the charge, the mark on his left hand blazed. The crimson gauntlet exploded into existence over his arm, the green jewel pulsing with power. Open black lens bracket boost. Close black lens bracket. The voice echoed in the cavernous space. Felt more than heard. The Rasengan in his right hand, already a potent sphere of destruction, was instantly infused with a torrent of crimson draconic energy. It doubled in size, the blue chakra warring with the violent red, creating a shrieking vortex of purple power. Naruto met the stray's charge head-on. He thrust the enhanced Rasengan forward. The impact was absolute. The stray devil didn't even have time to scream. The moment the attack connected, its body was subjected to 1,000 conflicting vectors of force. It was simultaneously shredded, incinerated, and erased. But the attack didn't stop there. The spiraling dome of energy continued forward, carving a perfectly clean, corkscrewing tunnel through the back wall of the warehouse and into the night beyond. When the light faded, Naruto stood in the silence, breathing a little heavily. The gauntlet on his arm dissolved back into light. Behind him, Rias and her peerage were staring, utterly speechless, at the gaping spiral-carved hole in their world. They had come to hunt a monster, and had discovered they'd brought a walking apocalypse with them. Suddenly, from the hole in the wall, a last, desperate tendril of the stray's energy, a dying lash of spite, shot out. It wasn't aimed at Naruto, but at Kaneko, who was just landing on the ground nearby, momentarily off balance. Naruto moved without thinking. He crossed the distance in a single, explosive burst of speed, positioning himself between Kaneko and the attack. The energy tendril slammed into his back, tearing through his jacket and eliciting a sharp grunt of pain. It wasn't a devastating blow, but it burned, and it was meant for someone else. He stumbled forward, catching himself before he fell. He turned his head, looking back at Kaneko. "You okay?" he asked, his voice a little strained. Kaneko stared at him, her usual stoicism completely gone, replaced by wide-eyed shock. He had just taken a hit for her. Without hesitation, Rias landed softly beside them, her expression unreadable. She looked from the hole in her warehouse to the fresh wound on Naruto's back, which was already beginning to steam as Kurama's chakra did its work. Back at the estate, the mood was different. The tension was gone, replaced by a grudging, profound respect. As Naruto sat shirtless while Akeno, with a mischievous glint in her eye, tended to the fading wound on his back, Rias finally broke the silence. "What I told you was the truth," she said, her voice quiet. But it wasn't the whole truth. Naruto glanced over his shoulder at her. "I am engaged to be married," she said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. "To a man named Rias Gremory. It's an arrangement made by my family to preserve the purity of our bloodline. I have no say in the matter." She walked to the window, staring out at the surreal landscape of the underworld. "In our society, disputes of this nature can be settled through a formal battle, a rating game. My peerage against his. If I win, the engagement is broken. If I lose," she didn't need to finish. She turned back to him, her regal composure stripped away, leaving behind a desperate, determined young woman. "Rias's peerage is composed of 15 pieces. Mine has only just begun. On paper, I don't stand a chance. I wasn't just looking for a new servant, Naruto. I was looking for a miracle. I was looking for a power strong enough to defy the laws of our world and win me my freedom." Her blue eyes locked with his. "I didn't just seek the Red Dragon Emperor. I sought a partner, a champion who understands what it's like to have your fate decided for you by others." Naruto was silent for a long time. He thought of his own life. The scorn of the villagers. The burden of the Nine Tails. The council's decision to cage him. His fate had always been in the hands of others. He was a Jinchuriki, a weapon, a tool. Rias Gremory, for all her power and privilege, was in a cage of her own. A beautiful, gilded cage. But a cage nonetheless. He stood up, shrugging his jacket back over his shoulders. He walked over to her, stopping just before her. He was shorter than her, but in that moment, he seemed to tower over her. "When is the fight?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Rias blinked, startled by the sudden acceptance. "We don't know. Soon." Naruto nodded slowly. He looked at her, at the hope and fear warring in her eyes, and made his decision. He wasn't her servant. He wasn't her pawn. But he would be her ally. "Fine," he said, his voice ringing with the unshakable conviction of a shinobi giving his word. "I'll help you. Let this riser guy come. We'll be ready for him." He offered her a small, confident smirk. It wasn't the loud, boisterous grin of his youth. This was something different, sharper, more dangerous. "After all," he added, a flicker of crimson light dancing in his eyes, "I hate people who think they can decide someone else's life for them." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Phoenix Fire and Dragon's Roar. The week that followed was a blur of focused, relentless training. Naruto, accustomed to a life of constant readiness, adapted to the Gremory peerage's routine. Nay, with a discipline that both impressed and unsettled them. He sparred with Kiba, his unorthodox, unpredictable movements forcing the knight to abandon his elegant forms for desperate, reactive swordplay. He endured Akeno's lightning, not dodging, but taking the hits to understand their nature, his regenerative abilities patching him up almost as fast as she could strike. He even managed to get Kaneko to engage in taijutsu drills, her brute strength a shocking counterpoint to his fluid grace. He was a natural leader, not because he gave orders, but because his own work ethic was infectious. He saw their weaknesses with a shinobi's eye and offered blunt, practical advice. He taught Kaneko to channel her power into a single, explosive point rather than using it like a battering ram. He showed Kiba how to use his speed for misdirection, not just direct attacks. He was integrating himself, becoming the core around which they tightened their formation. During a break, as Kiba panted on the training grounds, nursing a bruised wrist, he looked over at Naruto, who was calmly meditating. "How do you do it?" Kiba asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. "You fight like you've been at war your whole life." Naruto opened one eye, the blue sharp and clear. "Pretty much," he said, and left it at that. The simple, unadorned truth of it was more telling than any long story could have been. It was during one of these sessions, as Rias was explaining the strategic objective of capturing an enemy's base in a raiding game, that the world decided to burn. Without warning, a pillar of fire erupted in the center of the training grounds. It wasn't the chaotic, destructive flame of a jutsu. This was controlled, arrogant. The flames swirled into a vortex, then receded, leaving behind a group of figures. At their center was a young man with short blonde hair and an aura of supreme, unshakable self-importance. He wore a flamboyant crimson suit and a smirk that looked like it had been permanently affixed to his face. The air around him shimmered with heat. This was Rias Gremory. "My dearest Rias," he announced, his voice smooth and condescending, as he spread his arms wide. "Rias has come to visit his beautiful bride-to-be. Have you missed me?" Behind him stood his peerage, a full complement of 15. At the forefront was a woman with long silver hair and the stern expression of a queen, his queen, Ubeluna. The others watched the Gremory team with expressions ranging from disinterest to outright scorn. Rias's face hardened into a mask of regal frost. "Rias, this is my family's private training ground. You are not welcome here." Rias simply chuckled, a grating sound. "Nonsense, my love, all that is yours will soon be Rias's. I am merely surveying my property." His eyes scanned her peerage, dismissing Kiba with a wave, letting his gaze linger on Akino with lecherous appreciation, and ignoring Kaneko entirely. Then his eyes landed on Naruto. He paused, his smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. He could feel the dormant power in the boy, a strange, potent mix of energies he didn't recognize. But the boy's clothes were tattered, his posture that of a soldier, not a noble. He was clearly a commoner. A stray. "And what is this?" Rias asked, gesturing dismissively at Naruto. "Did you pick up a human pet, Rias? He has the stench of mortality all over him. You should really find better quality servants." The Gremory peerage tensed. Kiba's hand went to the hilt of his sword. Akino's smile became a razor's edge. Naruto didn't move. He had been sitting cross-legged on the ground. And he remained there, his expression utterly placid. He just watched Rias, his eyes taking in every detail, his mind cataloging, analyzing. This was the man who thought he owned Rias. This arrogant, preening fool. A cold, quiet anger began to smolder in his gut. "He is my servant," Rias said, her voice dangerously cold. "And you will treat him with respect." "Respect?" Rias laughed, a full-throated, insulting sound. "One does not respect a tool, my dear. One uses it. Has he been useful? Can he fetch things? Or is he just for your amusement?" One of Rias's pawns, a brutish-looking man with a scarred face, swaggered forward. "Lord Rias is talking to his fiancée, stray dog. Know your place." He reached out to shove Naruto's shoulder, to physically put him back in his place. It was a mistake. Naruto's hand shot up, not with blinding speed, but with an unnerving, deliberate motion. He didn't catch the man's hand, he caught his wrist. The pawn's eyes widened as Naruto's fingers, seemingly without effort, tightened like a steel vise. There was a sickening series of cracks as the bones in the man's wrist fractured. The pawn let out a choked scream, his arrogance vaporizing into pure agony. Naruto stood up, still holding the man's wrist, and twisted. He used the man's own momentum to spin him around and slam him face first into the dirt at Rias's feet. It was a single, fluid, humiliating motion. Naruto looked up from the groaning pawn, his eyes locking directly with Rias's. The placid look was gone. His gaze was flat, cold, and utterly devoid of fear. "Touch me again," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the training ground with chilling clarity, "and you'll lose the whole arm." The entire Phoenix peerage was stunned into silence. Rias's smirk had vanished completely, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock, which quickly morphed into rage. His body began to glow with a faint, golden aura. "You dare lay a hand on one of Rias's own?" He laid his hand on me first. Naruto replied, his voice still calm. I just finished the conversation. The tension was a physical thing, a spark away from an inferno. Before Riser could erupt, Rias stepped between them, her own crimson aura flaring to life. That is enough, Riser. You have seen my peerage. Now leave. Riser looked from Naruto's cold, challenging gaze to Rias's defiant one. He forced his anger down, his smirk returning, though it was now strained. So spirited. Riser enjoys a woman with fire. Very well, I will take my leave. Our families will be arranging the details of our glorious union soon. He gave Naruto one last, venomous glare. Enjoy your pet while you can, Rias. Riser will have him put down when you are my wife. With another theatrical burst of flame, Riser Phoenix and his entourage were gone. The silence they left behind was heavy. Kaneko stared at the spot where Naruto had been, a new, complex emotion in her eyes. Kiba let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Well, Akeno said, her voice a low purr. That was certainly direct. Rias turned to Naruto, her expression a mixture of gratitude and concern. Are you all right? I'm fine, he said, his gaze still fixed on the scorched grass where Riser had stood. The cold anger hadn't faded. It was banking, like embers waiting for a wind. That night, Naruto found Rias in the gardens. The underworld sky was a tapestry of strange, beautiful constellations, and the flowers around them gave off a soft, bioluminescent glow. She was standing by a fountain carved in the shape of a coiled serpent. Staring into the magically lit water, her regal posture slumped with a weariness she never showed in front of the others. He approached quietly, his shinobi training making his footsteps all but silent. He gets under your skin, he said, not as a question. She startled, turning to him. The moonlight, filtered through the strange sky, softened the edges of her face, revealing the vulnerability she kept so carefully hidden. I didn't hear you. Sorry, he said, though he wasn't. He leaned against the fountain a few feet away from her. What he said, about owning you, that's what's really bothering you, isn't it? Rias sighed, turning back to the water. In the world of devils, a name is everything. Gremory, Phoenix, Lucifer, they aren't just names, they're legacies. They're prisons of expectation. Since the day I was born, my path has been set. I am Rias Gremory, the heiress. I will marry a pure-blood devil of equal standing. I will produce an heir of equal or greater power. I will uphold the honor of my house. It doesn't matter what I want. It only matters what the name demands. Her voice was quiet, laced with a bitterness he recognized all too well. Riser doesn't want me, she said, her fists clenching at her sides. He wants my name. He wants the prestige of uniting the houses of Gremory and Phoenix. To him, I'm not a person. I'm a prize, a broodmare to secure his legacy. Naruto listened, his gaze steady. He understood completely. When I was a kid, he said, his voice a low rumble, I wasn't Naruto. I was the Jinchuriki, the demon fox. That's all they saw, not a boy who was lonely, or hungry, or just wanted to play with the other kids. I was a thing, a weapon to be kept in the village, a monster to be feared and hated. A tool for them to point at their enemies. He looked up at the alien stars. I thought if I got strong enough, if I became Hokage, they would finally have to see me. See Naruto Uzumaki. But that power, the thing I awaken. When I fought Gaara, when they saw that, their eyes were exactly the same. They just saw a bigger, scarier weapon. A new cage to build. He looked at her, his blue eyes meeting hers in the dim light. There was a profound, shared understanding in that look, a connection forged in the fires of a gilded cage and a village-wide prison. Your name is your cage. The fox inside me was mine. It's the same thing. Rias stared at him, her own eyes wide. She had recruited him for his power, for the legend of the Red Dragon Emperor. She had expected a warrior, perhaps even a monster. She had not expected this. She had not expected someone who could look into the very heart of her struggle and see his own reflection. I hate it, she whispered, the words a raw confession. I hate being a name. I just want to be me. Then we'll make them see, Naruto said, his voice simple and direct, imbued with an unshakable certainty. We'll beat him. We'll win your freedom. And you'll be Rias Gremory not because you have to be, but because you choose to be. A strange, warm feeling bloomed in her chest. For the first time, she felt like someone was fighting for her, not for her house, not for her title, but for her. Without thinking, she took a small step closer to him, the space between them shrinking, filled with a new, unspoken intimacy. Before either of them could say or do anything else, a figure appeared at the edge of the gardens. It was Graphia Lucifuge, Circe X Lucifer's queen and Rias's sister-in-law, her silver hair like spun moonlight. Her expression was, as always, neutral and professional. "My lady," Graphia said with a slight bow. "Lord Gremory and Lord Phoenix have reached an agreement. The raiding game has been officially sanctioned. It will take place in 10 days' time, in a dimension of their choosing." The moment was broken. Rias straightened up, her mask of the Gremory heiress slipping back into place. "Thank you, Graphia." Graphia's gaze shifted to Naruto, her silver eyes lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. "The Devil Council has also been made aware of your presence. There is considerable interest in the Red Dragon Emperor's new host." She then turned and departed as silently as she had arrived. The news settled over them, heavy and final. 10 days later, in the Grand Hall of the Gremory estate, the formal announcement was made before the family and their highest retainers. Rias stood at her father's side, her face a mask of determination. Naruto and the rest of her peerage stood behind her, a small but united front. Riser Phoenix, Javi, been invited for the formal declaration, preened before the assembly. "It is a mere formality, of course," he said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "Riser's peerage is complete and battle-hardened. He commends his dear Rias for her fighting spirit, but this outcome was decided from the start." He then turned, a malicious glint in his eye, and pointed a dramatic finger at Naruto. "And to think, she has pinned her final desperate hopes on this nameless human stray she picked up from some backwater land. A final pawn in a game already lost. How utterly pathetic." The assembled devils murmured, their gazes falling on Naruto, filled with pity and disdain. He was the symbol of Rias's desperation. Naruto didn't react to the whispers or the stares. He simply stepped forward, moving past Kiba and Akino to stand beside Rias. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Lord Gremory. He looked directly at Riser, and the entire hall seemed to fall silent, caught by the sheer, unadulterated intensity in his gaze. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor, carrying to every corner of the vast room. "You're wrong about one thing," Naruto said, his tone calm, conversational, and utterly terrifying. Riser raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what is that, pet?" "I'm not fighting for the Gremory name," Naruto stated. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a shocking, almost heretical statement. "I don't care about your houses or your politics." He took another step, closing the distance between them, forcing Riser to look down at him. His blue eyes were blazing. "I'm fighting for her." He locked eyes with Riser, his voice dropping to a low, personal promise of violence. "And in 10 days, when you're on your knees in front of everyone, I'm going to be the one to wipe that stupid, arrogant look off your face. Permanently." The silence that followed was absolute. Riser's smug expression had vanished, replaced by one of pure, murderous rage. Naruto had not just accepted the challenge, he had seized the narrative. He had turned Riser's public mockery into a personal, inescapable duel. He stood there, a commoner, a stray, and held the gaze of a Phoenix, promising his utter defeat, and in the chilling silence of that grand hall, not a single person doubted that he meant it. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Game of Kings. The world solidified around them, a perfect, sun-drenched replica of Kuo Academy. The sky was a flawless, static blue, the leaves on the trees didn't stir in the non-existent wind, and the entire landscape was contained within a shimmering, invisible dome. It was a pocket dimension, a sterile and silent stage for the war to come. An announcer's voice, magically amplified to sound like the voice of a god, echoed from the empty sky. "Welcome, esteemed members of the underworld, to the highly anticipated raiding game between the House of Gremory and the House of Phoenix. The challenger, the lovely heiress Rias Gremory, and the defender, the immortal Riser Phoenix. Let the game begin." On one side of the school grounds, Riser Phoenix and his 15-piece peerage appeared in a column of fire. They were a vision of arrogant confidence. Knights in polished armor, bishops in elegant robes, and at their head, Riser himself, his arms crossed, a condescending smirk already on his face. He looked every bit the victor awaiting his coronation. On the other side, near the running track, Rias's team materialized in a swirl of crimson light. They were outnumbered more than 2-1, a fact made starkly clear in the open space. The pressure was immense. Naruto could feel the weight of thousands of magical gazes watching them through the broadcast, judging, dissecting. "Remember the plan," Rias said, her voice tight but steady. She looked at each member of her small family, her gaze lingering on Naruto for a moment longer. Naruto gave a short, sharp nod. He ignored the announcer, ignored the watching eyes. To him, this was just another mission, albeit with stranger stakes. He stepped forward, taking point. "All right," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Let's make some noise." He UGHT his hands together in his signature seal. Riser, watching from across the field, scoffed. Is he starting with that parlor trick? How droll. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The field erupted in smoke. Not one, not two, but hundreds of Naruto Uzumakis flooded the grounds. They poured out from the original, an orange and black tide that swarmed over the running track, across the baseball field, and towards the school building. Each one was solid, each radiating a small but distinct energy signature. The Phoenix peerage, who had been expecting a cautious, defensive opening, froze in sheer bewilderment. "What is this mockery?" Riser demanded, his smirk finally faltering. "Don't just stand there, you fools. They're just illusions. Destroy them." Ubeluna, his queen, commanded. Riser's pawns and knights surged forward, cutting into the sea of clones. They sliced one, and it vanished in a puff of smoke. They blasted another, and it disappeared. But for every one they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place, swarming them, harassing them with poorly thrown kunai and clumsy taijutsu. It wasn't an attack, it was a sensory overload. A smokescreen made of flesh. While the main force of clones engaged in a chaotic, distracting melee on the field, dozens more broke off, moving with a shinobi's purpose. They scaled the walls of the school, slipped through open windows, and melted into the shadows of the surrounding trees. They were his eyes and ears, a living, thinking intelligence network spreading across the entire map. "All right, I've got them," the real Naruto said, his eyes closed. In concentration as the first wave of information flooded his mind. He was standing beside Rias and the others, who had used the initial chaos to take cover behind the gymnasium. Riser's 4 pawns are grouped up, moving east around the track. They're arrogant, sticking together. "Kiba, they're yours." Kiba nodded, a fierce grin on his face. "With pleasure." He vanished, his speed a golden blur. "Kaneko, there's a rook. One of the armored ones, heading for the old school building alone. He thinks he's going to flank us. I'm sending a squad of clones to lead him into the gymnasium. Be ready." Kaneko gave a silent, affirmative grunt and disappeared into the shadows of the gym. "Akano, their bishops are setting up on the school roof. They're preparing some kind of long-range assault. Flush them out." Akano's smile was predatory. Era, sounds like fun." Black wings erupted from her back, and she soared into the sky, a storm cloud gathering around her. "What about us?" Rias asked, her hand crackling with the power of destruction. "We wait," Naruto said, his eyes still closed. "We let them break themselves on the rocks. Riser's the target, everyone else is just in the way." Kiba Mauve, ed like a phantom through the trees lining the track. The 4 Phoenix pawns were laughing, easily dispatching the clumsy clones that threw themselves at them. "Is this the best the Gremory team can do?" One of them jeered. "He's behind you." Naruto's voice echoed in Kiba's mind, transmitted via a clone hidden in the canopy above. Kiba burst from the tree line. "Sword birth," he yelled. The ground erupted around the pawns as dozens of demonic swords, of all shapes and sizes, shot up like a forest of jagged steel. The pawns were instantly trapped, their path of retreat cut off. Before they could even react, Kiba was among them. A blur of motion, his own blade singing through the air. 4 quick, precise strikes, and the announcer's voice declared their retirement. 4 of Lord Riser's pawns have been eliminated. In the gymnasium, the armored Rook kicked the doors in, scattering the 10 Naruto clones that had been deliberately baiting him. "Come out, little rat," he boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Look up, dumbass," all 10 clones said in unison, pointing at the ceiling. The Rook looked up just as Kaneko, wreathed in a white aura of Tuki, smashed through the rafters. She descended like a miniature meteor, her small fist connecting with the top of his helmet. The resulting crunch was sickening. The Rook's armor crumpled, and he was driven into the polished wood. End floor with enough force to crack the foundation. Unbelievable. Lord Riser's Rook has been retired by Lady Gremory's Rook. On the school's roof, 2 of Riser's bishops were chanting, weaving a complex magical circle. "This will incinerate the entire field and all those annoying copies," one said. A shadow fell over them. "Sorry to interrupt," Akeno purred from above. A massive bolt of golden lightning, holy power anathema to devils, slammed down between them. They shrieked, diving for cover as Akeno descended, a tempest of thunder and light. The battle was short, brutal, and ended with the smell of ozone in the air. And both of Lord Riser's bishops are out of the game. What a stunning turn of events. In the spectator dimension, the assembled devil aristocracy was in an uproar. 7-0. F. Riser's pieces had been eliminated in the first 5 minutes of the game, and the Gremory team had yet to take a single loss. Riser's face, broadcast on massive magical screens, was a mask of pure fury. "Enough," he roared, his body bursting into flames. He incinerated 100 clones in a single, furious pulse of heat. "Yubeluna, find them, burn them all." His queen nodded, her hands glowing. She flew into the air, unleashing a massive, spiraling torrent of blue fire that swept across the field, turning clone after clone to ash. "She's coming," Naruto said, his eyes snapping open. "Rias, you're up." Rias stepped out from behind the gym, her crimson aura flaring to life. She met Yubeluna's firestorm with a concentrated blast of her power of destruction. The 2 attacks met mid-air, a cataclysmic explosion of blue and crimson that shook the entire dimension. The queens were now locked in combat. This was the signal. The battle had consolidated. "Everyone, main building, now," Naruto commanded, and the remnants of the Gremory peerage converged. The fight that followed was a desperate, chaotic brawl in the halls and classrooms of the school. Kiba, his speed a vital asset, managed to eliminate Riser's remaining knight, but was caught by a surprise attack from a bishop and forced into retirement. Kaneko, a wrecking ball of power, took out Riser's second Rook, but was ganged up on by 3 pawns and retired through sheer numbers. Akeno fought valiantly, but was eventually cornered and defeated by Yubeluna herself. Finally, in the main courtyard, an exhausted Rias faced down the enemy queen. With a final, desperate surge of power, she unleashed a massive wave of destruction that overwhelmed Yubeluna's defenses, forcing her retirement. But the effort left Rias panting. Demonic energy reserves dangerously low. Lady Rias's queen, knight, and Rook have been retired. But she has taken down all of Lord Riser's servants. It all comes down to this: Rias Gremory and her final pawn versus the immortal Riser Phoenix. Riser landed in the courtyard, his suit barely singed, his smirk back in full force. He looked at Rias's exhausted form and then at Naruto, who stood protectively in front of her. "So, it comes down to the pet," Riser sneered. "Your little gambit was amusing, I'll admit. But it has only delayed the inevitable. You cannot kill what cannot die, human." He burst into flames, regenerating the few minor scratches he'd sustained. "This ends now." He lunged, not at Naruto, but at Rias. Naruto moved, a blur of orange. He appeared in Riser's path, his left arm already encased in the crimson boosted gear. Open black lens bracket boost. Close black lens bracket. He met Riser's flaming fist with his own, the impact creating a shockwave that shattered every window in the courtyard. He was pushed back a foot, his sandals digging into the pavement. Riser's strength was immense. "You are fast," Riser admitted, surprised. "But you are only mortal." He pressed his attack, a relentless barrage of fire-wreathed punches and kicks. Naruto was on the defensive, dodging, blocking, the gauntlet on his arm boosting every 10 seconds, allowing him to just barely keep up. Open black lens bracket boost. 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 Close black lens bracket. He managed to land a solid punch to Riser's gut, sending him skidding back, but the wound was already healing, closing over with a sizzle of fire. It's useless. Riser laughed, his confidence soaring. Every second I grow stronger. While you just tire yourself out. Naruto ignored him, his mind racing. He needed more power, faster. Kid, let me out, Kurama growled in his mind. Let me burn him to a cinder. No, Naruto thought back. Not your power, ours. He looked over his shoulder at Rias. She was watching, her face pale with worry, but her eyes were filled with an unwavering belief in him. That look, that absolute trust, was the final key. He wasn't fighting for a village that hated him, or for a title he didn't want. He was fighting for her freedom. His purpose had never been so clear. Riser, he yelled, his voice a roar. You said this was over. You're right. A torrent of power exploded from him. It wasn't just the crimson of the boosted gear. It was a violent, brilliant surge of golden-orange chakra, Kurama's power. Not leaking out in rage, but willingly given, merging, synchronizing with the dragon's soul in his arm. Open black lens bracket boost. Boost, 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 boost. Close black lens bracket. The gauntlet's chant became a frantic heartbeat. I, who am about to awaken, he began, the ancient words of the Dragon Emperor flowing from him as if he'd known them his entire life. Am the heavenly dragon who has stolen the principles of domination from God. The crimson armor began to spread over his body, scale by scale. I laugh at the infinite, and I grieve at the dream. Golden chakra swirled around the armor, etching itself into the plates. Forming glowing, whisker-like marks on the helmet and intricate tomo patterns on the pauldrons. I shall become the red dragon of domination. The full armor clicked into place. The traditional scale mail was there, but it was transformed. It pulsed with a dual light, crimson and gold. The wings on his back were not just draconic, they were tipped with blazing golden energy, like a miniature sun. The green jewels on the armor now had slitted, fox-like pupils within them. And I shall sink you to the depths of the crimson purgatory. Juggernaut Drive. The announcer was screaming. The spectators were on their feet, but Naruto heard none of it. He felt only power. A perfect, seamless fusion of the dragon and the fox. Riser stared, his arrogance finally shattering into pure, unadulterated fear. The being in front of him felt wrong. It felt like a god. Naruto vanished. He reappeared directly in front of Riser, his fist buried in the Phoenix's stomach. The force of the blow was so immense it didn't just throw Riser back, it folded him in half, a wave of displaced air flattening the trees behind him. Riser flew across the courtyard and slammed into the far wall of the school building with enough force to bring the whole section down on top of him. Before the dust even settled, a pillar of fire erupted from the rubble. Riser emerged, his body healing, but it was slower now, sluggish. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by a desperate, pain-filled grimace. I'm immortal. He choked out. Naruto didn't answer. He held out his right hand, and a sphere of violently swirling energy began to form. It was a Rasengan, but it was unlike any he had ever created. It was a churning vortex of golden red energy. The sound it made not a hum, but a hungry, draconic roar. The boosted dragon chakra Rasengan. This ends, Naruto said, his voice distorted and amplified by the helmet. He shot forward, closing the distance in less than a heartbeat. Riser tried to raise a wall of fire, but Naruto plowed through it as if it were smoke. He slammed the roaring sphere of energy into Riser's chest. For a moment, there was no sound. Only a blinding light. The attack wasn't an explosion of force. It was an injection of pure, chaotic power. The life-giving energy of Kurama and the overwhelming, dominating power of Dedrade poured into Riser's body, directly into his regenerative core. It was like trying to fill a cup with a waterfall. His immortality, his very essence, was overloaded, short-circuited, and snuffed out. The golden flames of the phoenix sputtered, flickered, and died. Riser Phoenix's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Not healing, not regenerating, just defeated. Silence. The entire dimension was silent. The announcer finally found his voice, stammering. Our Riser Phoenix is unable to battle. The winner of the rating game is the House of Gremory. The fused armor around Naruto dissolved into motes of red and gold light. He stood there, panting, his jacket in tatters, exhausted but triumphant. He heard footsteps, and turned to see Rias running towards him. Her face was a mess of tears and relief and a joy so profound it was breathtaking. She didn't slow down. She threw herself at him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and crashed her lips against his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, passionate, and filled with all the fear and hope and gratitude of the past few weeks. It was a kiss that sealed her freedom, a kiss that declared her choice. In front of the stunned eyes of the entire underworld, Rias Gremory, heiress to one of the great houses, was kissing her pawn, her champion, her savior. Naruto, surprised for a second, relaxed and returned the kiss, his arms wrapping around her waist, holding her steady. They had won, and in that victory, in the silent courtyard of their battlefield, they had found the beginning of something far more important. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A Summit of Serpents. The victory was hollow. The cheers of the Gremory household, the relieved tears of Rias's mother, the proud, booming laugh of her father, it all felt distant to Naruto, like sounds heard from underwater. He sat in the opulent Gremory gardens, the same spot where he and Rias had shared their moment of understanding, and stared at his left hand. The faint, tattoo-like mark of the dragon pulsed with a soft, residual light. He had won. He had secured Rias's freedom. But the power he had used, that perfect, terrifying fusion of dragon and fox, had felt like balancing on a razor's edge over an infinite drop. That was a foolish risk. Ddrake's voice rumbled in his mind, the dragon's tone uncharacteristically somber. The chant for Juggernaut Drive is a curse, partner. T is a key that unlocks the cage of my predecessor's rage and madness, a power meant to burn the user's life force as fuel. You should have been consumed. Naruto flexed his fingers. But I wasn't. No. The fox's energy, and your own strange life force, it acted as a stabilizer. Your will was not focused on destruction, but on protection. That clarity gave you control. But it was a 1 in a million chance. Attempt it again in a state of rage or despair, and your soul will be the first thing the armor devours. A sobering thought. He had a weapon that could destroy gods, but it came with a hair trigger pointed directly at his own head. Footsteps on the grass broke his concentration. Rias approached, not in her usual uniform or noble attire, but in a simple, elegant dress. The weight of the raiding game was gone from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet, radiant confidence. She sat beside him on the stone bench, their shoulders almost touching. My father wants to throw a grand ball in your honor, she said, her voice soft. My mother is already designing a medal for you. They're calling you the Crimson Dragon of Gremory. Naruto grunted, a sound of distaste. Another title, another label. This one is different, she insisted gently. This one you earned. This one was given in gratitude, not fear. She paused, then slowly, tentatively, her fingers intertwined with his. Her hand was warm, soft. Thank you, Naruto, for everything. He looked at their joined hands, then at her. The sincerity in her sky-blue eyes was absolute. This was real. This connection. This victory. Maybe, just this once. He could allow himself to enjoy it. He gave her hand a light squeeze. Before he could reply, Graphia Lucifuge appeared at the edge of the garden, her presence as silent and sudden as a falling shadow. Lady Rias, Lord Naruto, she said, her voice impeccably formal. The use of Lord was new, a clear indicator of the shift in his status. Your brother, the Devil King Searsex Lucifer, has formally requested your presence in the capital. He wishes for an immediate audience. Rias stiffened. A direct summons from the Devil King himself was no small matter. The ripples from their VCTORY were already turning into a tidal wave. Lucifad, the capital of the underworld, was a city of perpetual twilight, built from black basalt and lit by the cold, magical glow of captured stars. Nari that defied gravity pierced the bruised purple sky, and the air hummed with a power so ancient and dense it felt like a physical weight. It was a place designed to awe, to intimidate, to remind all who entered that they were in the domain of kings. The audience chamber of Searsex Lucifer was surprisingly understated compared to the Gothic grandeur of the city. It was a large, circular room with a high, domed ceiling. The walls lined with ancient-looking tomes. Sears himself sat not on a throne, but behind a simple, elegant desk. He wore a relaxed but dignified suit, and his crimson hair, the signature of his bloodline, seemed to absorb the ambient light. The only thing that betrayed his immense power was the sheer, crushing pressure of his aura, a calm, bottomless ocean of demoni. Sea energy that made the air in the room feel thick. Sears smiled warmly as they entered, a disarming gesture that did nothing to lessen the intensity of his presence. Rias, Master Uzumaki, please, come in. Thank you for arriving so promptly. Brother, Rias said, offering a respectful bow. Naruto simply nodded, his eyes scanning the room, his senses on high alert. He stood beside Rias, his posture relaxed but ready. A silent guardian. Sears gaze fell upon Naruto, and his smile became one of genuine, academic curiosity. I have watched the broadcast of your game against Riser no less than 20 times, he said. His voice light, and I must confess, I am more fascinated with each viewing. That power you displayed, it was not simply the boosted gear. Nor was it merely the power of the 9 tails. It was a perfect synthesis. Tell me, Master Uzumaki, what is this energy you call chakra? It wasn't a demand, it was the question of an eager scholar. Naruto considered for a moment. He was no diplomat, but he understood the value of information. It's the life energy of my world, Naruto answered directly. A mix of spiritual and physical energy. We use it to perform techniques we call jutsu. Fascinating, Sears mused. A world that evolved its own system of power, completely independent of our own. That would explain why you are not bound by the rules that govern us. He leaned forward, his friendly demeanor becoming sharper, more focused. Rias tells me you came from that world. That you left it behind. My village saw me as a weapon to be controlled, Naruto said, his voice flat. I disagreed. The simple, unadorned statement carried more weight than any dramatic speech. Sears nodded slowly, a look of understanding in his eyes. He, of all people, understood the burden of power and the loneliness it brought. He had not summoned Naruto here to intimidate him or claim him. He had summoned him to measure him. And what he saw was not a pawn, but a king in his own right. I see, Sears said. Then your allegiance is to my sister, and my sister alone. That's right. Good. Sears expression turned grim. Because I am afraid your time for rest is over. The reason for this urgent summons goes beyond your victory. A dangerous situation is developing. A high-ranking fallen angel, a cadre by the name of Kokobile, has gone rogue. He is a warmonger, obsessed with reigniting the Great War. We have intelligence that he is making his move in the human world, specifically, in Kuo town. He stood up, his presence filling the room. To that end, a peace summit has been convened. The leaders of the 3 factions will meet to present a united front against this threat. The Archangel Michael will represent heaven, and Governor-General Azazel will represent the fallen angels. The meeting will take place at Kuo Academy, a neutral ground under my sister's watch. I want you and your peerage to be present. It is time the old guard saw the strength of the new generation. The gymnasium at Kuo Academy had been transformed. Powerful barriers shimmered around the building, isolating it from the rest of the world. Inside, 3 tables were arranged in a triangle. Sears and Graphia sat at one. At another sat a man with long blonde hair and a serene, beatific smile, flanked by a beautiful, sword-wielding woman. This was the Archangel Michael and his ace, Irina Shido. At the third table sat a man with black hair and a laid-back, almost bored expression, wearing a rock and roll t-shirt under a trench coat. This was Azazel, leader of the fallen angels. The tension in the room was a physical force, a silent storm of conflicting energies born from eons of hatred and bloodshed. Rias and her peerage stood behind Sears, a silent testament to the devil faction's future. Naruto stood slightly apart from them, his arms crossed, his gaze sweeping over the attendees, analyzing, categorizing threats. Just as the talks were about to begin, the air shimmered beside Azazel. A young man with silver hair and a lazy, confident smirk appeared. He wore a simple V-neck shirt and jeans, looking more like a delinquent than a guest at a summit of gods. The moment he appeared, Naruto felt a sharp, violent jolt from his left arm. The boosted gear materialized instantly, the green jewel on the back of his hand glowing with a fierce, angry light. Across the room, the silver-haired boy glanced down at his own hand as a brilliant white, draconic gauntlet, adorned with blue jewels, snapped into existence. In Naruto's mind, D-Drake's voice was a guttural roar of pure, undiluted animosity. Albion, the silver-haired boy smirked, as if hearing a familiar, amusing voice in his own head. D-Drake, he murmured, his voice too low for most to hear. So this is your new host. He smells different. His eyes, a cool, intelligent violet, locked onto Naruto's. There was no malice in his gaze, but something far more unsettling, the keen, predatory interest of a rival who had just found a worthy opponent. It was the instinctual recognition of two forces of nature destined to collide. Azazel sighed, running a hand through his hair. Valley, must you always be so dramatic? This is the one I was telling you about. The host of D-Drake, Naruto Uzumaki. He gestured to Naruto, then back to the boy. Everyone, this is Valley Lucifer, host of the Vanishing Dragon, the White Dragon Emperor. The name, Lucifer, sent a shockwave through the room. He is a descendant of the original Devil King, Azazel explained with a casual wave. And my adopted son, for all the trouble he's worth. Valley ignored the introductions. His entire focus was on Naruto. So, you're the one who made a fool of the Phoenix chicken, he said, his voice laced with amusement. I saw the broadcast. That fusion of power, it was new. I've never seen D-Drake's aura mix with anything so cleanly. You've piqued my interest, Naruto Uzumaki. Before Naruto could respond, a sudden, piercing whine filled the air. The barriers around the school warped, shifting from a clear shimmer to a sickly, opaque gray. A new layer of power had been laid over their own, sealing them in. It felt impossibly ancient, divine in its sheer magnitude, but utterly alien. Figures began to bleed out of the shadows. Dozens of them, all clad in identical white, high-collared cloaks and blank, porcelain masks. They moved with a chilling, synchronized silence, their energy signatures feeling sterile, pure, and completely devoid of emotion. It was not demonic, nor holy, nor fallen. Naruto's blood ran cold. He didn't recognize the energy. But he recognized the movements. The disciplined economy of motion, the way they positioned themselves to cut off all angles of escape. This was the work of highly trained shinobi. Well, this is unexpected, Azazel remarked, leaning back in his chair, though his eyes were sharp and alert. The cloaked figures attacked. They didn't use magic. They wielded rods of black K energy that they could shape into spears and swords. Their movements were a blur, and when Michael's guards tried to erect a barrier of light, the assassins simply phased through it, their black rods disrupting the holy energy. Their objective became clear within seconds. They ignored the faction leaders, treating them as obstacles rather than targets. Their coordinated assault was focused on two individuals, Naruto and Valley. Finally, a decent fight. Valley laughed, a wild, exhilarating sound. A pair of brilliant white dragon wings, tipped with glowing blue feathers of light, burst from his back. He shot forward, his fist connecting with one of the assassins, sending him flying. The assassins swarmed, forcing Naruto and Valley back to back in the center of the room. Looks like we're the popular ones, Valley quipped, a grin plastered on his face. He seemed to be enjoying this. Less talking, more fighting, Naruto growled. His body exploded with crimson and gold energy as the fused Bala NCE breaker armor materialized around him in a flash of light. Valley's eyes widened for a fraction of a second at the sight of the unique armor. Oh, that is interesting, he breathed. They fought. It was a maelstrom of crimson and white. Two dragons unleashed. Naruto was a whirlwind of tactical violence, his clones appearing and disappearing in flashes of smoke, creating openings for devastating Shuriken attacks that shredded the assassins' forms. Valley was a hurricane of raw power, his vanishing dragon gauntlet glowing with a blue light. Open black lens bracket divide, close black lens bracket. The assassins that got too close suddenly staggered, their own power being siphoned away and added to Valley's. Their combined might was beyond overwhelming. It was an apocalypse. The assassins, clinical and emotionless, seemed to recognize this. They had gathered their data. One of them made a sharp, clicking sound, and as one, they began a swift, organized retreat, flashing through a series of complex hand seals that made Naruto's eyes narrow. They were fading, stepping through ripples in space. The last one to leave paused, his masked face turning directly to Naruto. His voice was a cold, synthesized whisper that cut through the sounds of battle. "The child of the false world," he said. "Your chakra sings the mother's song. She is stirring from her long slumber to reclaim what was stolen." The assassin raised his black rod and seared a single, glowing symbol into the gymnasium floor. It was a circle with several tomo inside it, a third, slitted eye open at the top. It was the emblem of the Otsutsuki. The mother reclaims her own. And with that, he vanished. The oppressive gray barrier shattered, leaving the leaders of the three factions standing in a wrecked gymnasium, staring at the cryptic, burning message on the floor. The summit was over. The fragile peace was a joke. An unknown enemy, a force from outside their reality, had just declared war. Naruto and Valley stood amidst the debris, their armor dissolving into light. The instinctual rivalry between them was still there, a low hum of energy in the air, but it was now overshadowed by a chilling, shared threat. Circex, Michael, and Azazel looked at the two of them, then at the burning symbol. And the implications were terrifying. This new enemy wasn't just here to fight. They were here for the heavenly dragons. They were here for something their mother had lost. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Valkyrie's Choice. The aftermath of the summit was a flurry of controlled panic. Circex and Azazel, for once in complete agreement, had sealed the gymnasium and begun a frantic, high-level investigation. The symbol left by the assassins was utterly alien to their lore, and the energy signature it gave off was so ancient it predated their oldest records. It was a blank spot in their history, a threat without a name. Naruto, however, knew the name. He had seen a crude, faded version of that symbol once, in a forbidden scroll Jiraiya had let him glimpse, a text detailing the mythical origins of chakra. Otsutsuki, a clan that came from the stars, the progenitors of all shinobi. He had dismissed it as a fairy tale. Now, that fairy tale had just tried to kill him. He shared this information with Rias and a grim-faced Circex, explaining the legend of Kagaya Otsutsuki, the rabbit goddess who had consumed the fruit of a divine tree and become the first being in his world to wield chakra. They called her the Mother. Naruto finished, the pieces clicking into place with a dreadful finality. She gave birth to the Sage of Six Paths, the founder of ninjutsu. A creator deity, Circex murmured, his expression darker than Naruto had ever seen it. A primordial being from another dimension. This is a threat on a scale we have never before encountered. Azazel, using his expertise on ancient artifacts and divine powers, found a single, tenuous thread. The assassins' energy, while alien, had a faint resonance with some of the older, more obscure creation myths of the Norse pantheon. It was a long shot, a whisper in the dark, but it was all they had. Odin, Azazel had declared, tapping a pen on a map of the mythological realms. The All-Father of Asgard. He's a perverted old fool, but his knowledge of the ancient world is unparalleled. If anyone has heard of this Kagaya, it's him. And so, they went to war in a library of gods. Asgard was a realm of breathtaking, raw beauty, a floating continent of jagged mountains, deep, mist-filled fjords, and evergreen forests that seemed to touch the sky. At its center, a rainbow bridge of shimmering, solidified light. The Bifrost led to a golden city of towering mead halls and celestial observatories. It was a world forged from myth, radiating a wild, untamed power that was a stark contrast to the ordered, Gothic gloom of the underworld. Their arrival via a Gremory magic circle on the outskirts of the city was met not with a welcoming party, but with a phalanx of warriors in gleaming silver armor, their winged helmets casting long shadows. They were the Valkyries, the shield maidens of Asgard, and at their head stood a woman with long, silver lilac hair braided down her back, wearing a severe, formal uniform. Her expression was one of stern disapproval, and her blue eyes, sharp as shards of ice, were fixed on Rias's group as if they were vermin. "Devils," she stated, her voice crisp and laced with contempt. "Lord Odin was informed of your coming, but I must confess, I fail to see why the All-Father would entertain the spawn of the underworld. State your business, and be quick about it." "We are here on the authority of Circex, Lucifer and Azazel," Rias replied, her tone cool and regal, refusing to be intimidated. We seek an audience with Odin regarding a matter of multi-faction security. The Valkyrie's gaze swept over them, lingering on Naruto. She could feel the immense, chaotic power thrumming beneath his skin. It was unruly, untamed. An affront to the ordered discipline she embodied. Security, or are you simply seeking to spread your filth into our realm? Asgard has no need for alliances with your kind. My name is Rosweiss, she continued, her voice sharp. I am Lord Odin's bodyguard and the foremost scholar of Norse magic at the Asgardian Institute. Your presence here is a diplomatic courtesy, nothing more. Do not stray, do not touch anything, and follow me. She turned on her heel and led them through the golden streets, her back ramrod straight. The citizens of Asgard, powerful-looking men and women with axes at their belts and an air of boisterous pride, stopped and stared, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Charming woman, Akino murmured, her usual playful smile in place, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She seems stressed, Kiba offered diplomatically. Naruto said nothing. He watched Rosweiss, not with anger, but with a strange sense of familiarity. He recognized the rigid posture, the self-imposed isolation, the fierce dedication to a duty that seemed to be crushing her. She was a soldier, just like him. A soldier who had forgotten how to be anything else. Odin's mead hall was a cacophony of sound and energy. A long, boisterous man with a gray beard, an eye patch, and a mischievous glint in his remaining eye sat on a simple, carved wooden throne. This was the All-Father, looking less like a king of gods and more like a rowdy old man in the middle of a grand party. He was surrounded by beautiful Valkyries, all of whom were refilling his drinking horn. Ah, the Gremory delegation. Odin boomed, his voice echoing through the hall. He waved a dismissive hand at Rosweiss's formal posture. Oh, lighten up, Rosie. We have guests. Come, sit. Have some mead. Rosweiss. S face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment at the nickname. Lord Odin, this is a matter of grave importance. All matters are grave when you're sober, Odin declared with a hearty laugh. He then turned his one good eye on Naruto, his expression becoming surprisingly keen. So, you're the new wielder of the Red Dragon. You've got Dedrag's stench all over you. But there's something else, something older. Earthy, smells like the roots of Yggdrasil itself. Rias stepped forward and explained the situation, detailing the attack on the summit and showing him a magical projection of the Otsutsuki symbol. As Odin looked at the symbol, the boisterous, drunken persona fell away like a mask. His eye narrowed, and the air in the hall grew cold. The laughter and chatter died down as other gods sensed the All-Father's shift in mood. Kagaya, Odin whispered, the name a curse on his lips. The Celestial Mother, the progenitor. I have not heard that name spoken aloud in millennia. I thought the tales were just that, echoes of a creation before our own. Legends to frighten young gods. He explained the myth. A being of immense power who came from a void between worlds. A being who sought to absorb all life, all energy, into herself, to achieve a state of perfect, silent unity. She was not a conqueror, but a reclaimer. The Norse pantheon, in their infancy, had fought one of her heralds and had barely survived. Their victory costing them dearly and forcing them to seal away all records of the event to prevent widespread panic. If she is truly stirring, Odin said, his voice grim, then this is not a war. This is an apocalypse, a Vanaheim-level extinction event. Suddenly, an alarm, a deep, resonant horn, blared through the city. A Valkyrie warrior, bleeding from a wound in her side, stumbled into the hall. All-Father, she gasped, it's the Einherjar, a faction of them, led by Vidar, they've turned on us. They're performing some kind of ritual at the Well of Erd. They're using forbidden magic. Rosweiss paled. Vidar, but he's one of our most decorated captains. It seems your internal security is as lax as your hospitality, Naruto commented dryly, already moving towards the exit. Where are you going? Rosweiss demanded, stepping in his path. This is Asgardian business. We will handle it. Naruto looked down at her, his gaze unwavering. You've got a traitor in your ranks. Your gods are panicking, and a ritual you don't understand is happening as we speak. You don't have time to handle it. You have time to let us help. Before she could protest further, he brushed past her. The rest of the Gremory peerage followed without hesitation. Odin, after a moment's surprise, let out a booming laugh. Go with them, Rosweiss. See what this new generation is made of. The Well of Erd was located in a sacred grove at the roots of a massive, glowing tree that seemed to be a sapling of Yggdrasil itself. Vidar, a powerfully built god with a fanatical light in his eyes, stood with a dozen other rogue Aesir. They were chanting around a glowing, pulsating sphere of energy that writhed with a sickly, white light. It was Kagaia's energy. Vidar, Rosweiss yelled, landing before them. Cease this madness. What is the meaning of this betrayal? Betrayal, Vidar sneered, his face contorted with zealotry. No, this is salvation. Odin has let our realm stagnate, content to drink and chase skirts while our power wanes. The priestess of the Celestial Mother has shown us the truth. She has offered us the power to restore Asgard to its former glory. All we must do is offer this sacred well as a conduit for her arrival. He gestured to the sphere. Behold, our new champion, an Einherjar reborn in the Mother's divine grace. The sphere cracked open, and a figure emerged. It was a warrior clad in white, spectral armor, its eyes glowing with a mindless, malevolent light. It radiated a power that made even Rosweiss take an involuntary step back. We'll handle the small fry, Naruto said, appearing at her side. You, Rias, Akeno. Take the champion, Kiba, Kaneko, with me. The battle was immediate and chaotic. Rosweiss found herself fighting alongside devils, her precise, rune-based magic a surprisingly effective complement to Naruto's clones, who were harrying the rogue gods, disrupting their formations. Rias and Akeno unleashed a calm, bin storm of destruction and lightning upon the Einherjar, but the creature was unnaturally resilient, its divine energy shrugging off their attacks. It swatted Akeno from the sky and sent Rias skid ding back with a powerful blast of white energy. Naruto, seeing this, acted instantly. He flashed through a series of hand seals, a technique none of his new comrades had ever seen. Futon. Rasenshuriken. A shrieking, windmill-like shuriken of pure wind chakra formed in his hand. He hurled it. The attack tore through the air, but the Einherjar, sensing its immense power, created a shield of white energy. The Rasenshuriken slammed into it and detonated, a massive dome of microscopic wind blades that shredded the grove and forced everyone to brace themselves. The Einherjar was still standing, its shield cracked but holding. It's too strong, Rias yelled, panting. Its regenerative abilities are on par with a Phoenix. Rosweiss, having just encased a rogue god in a prison of runes, watched the battle with a growing sense of despair. Her duty was to protect Asgard, to protect Odin, but here she was, completely outmatched by a power she couldn't comprehend. She felt useless, trapped by the limitations of her own knowledge. Naruto landed beside her, his expression grim. You're the expert on Norse magic, right? He asked, his voice sharp and direct. Yes, but I've never seen anything like. Stop thinking about what it is, and start thinking about what it's made of. He cut her off, his words a splash of cold water. It's a construct of divine energy, summoned from that well. Is there a way to sever that connection? A rune, a seal, anything? His question jolted her out of her panic. He wasn't asking her to fight it. He was asking for her expertise. He was using her as a specialist, not a simple soldier. Her mind, a library of ancient lore, began to race. The rune of Hagalas, she breathed, her eyes widening. The rune of disruption. If I could inscribe it on the well itself, it would disrupt the flow of energy. But I can't get close enough. You don't have to, Naruto said. Just make the seal, I'll deliver it. He held out his right hand. Now, trusting an instinct she didn't know she possessed, Rosweiss grabbed his wrist. She focused, her own magical energy flowing as she chanted in the ancient Norse tongue. A complex, glowing blue rune, crackling with disruptive power, formed on the back of Naruto's palm. It will only last for a minute, she warned. A minute is all I need. He glanced over at Rias, who was holding the Einherjar's attention with a barrage of attacks. Now, Rias, understanding instantly, unleashed the full, unrestrained force of her power of destruction. It wasn't aimed at the creature, but at the ground beneath it, destabilizing its footing. The Einherjar roared in frustration, momentarily distracted. That was the only opening Naruto needed. He moved, a blur of motion, a squadron of clones appearing around him to run interference. He didn't engage the enemy. He ran straight for the well. Vidar, seeing his plan, tried to intercept him, but Kiba and Kaneko slammed into him, a blur of speed and a fist of stone, holding the traitorous god in place. Naruto leapt over the lip of the well, his hand outstretched, the glowing blue rune aimed at the swirling vortex of energy within. He slammed his palm against the nexus of the ritual. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The rune of Hagalas flared, and the smooth flow of white energy from the well stuttered, spasmed, and then reversed with a deafening screech. A shockwave of pure, chaotic magic erupted from the well. The Einherjar champion, its power source severed, let out a final, silent scream before dissolving into motes of corrupted light. The remaining rogue gods were thrown back, their connection to their newfound power severed. The grove fell silent, the only sound the panting of the fighters. Naruto landed lightly on his feet, his job done. Vita, R and the other traitors were quickly subdued by the arriving Asgardian guards. Later, as they stood before Odin once more, the All-Father looked at them with a newfound respect. He provided them with a copy of the sealed records concerning the Celestial Mother, a text that would prove vital to their understanding of the enemy. As they prepared to depart, Naruto saw Roswise standing alone near the Bifrost Bridge. He walked over to her. "You fought well," he said simply. She looked at him, her stern mask faltering. The battle had shaken her to her core. She had seen the limits of her duty, the fragility of her world. And she had seen him, a complete outsider, trust her expertise in a way none of her own people ever had. My duty is here," she said, her voice uncertain, as if trying to convince herself. "I must protect Lord Odin. I must maintain order. Is that what you want?" Naruto asked, his question cutting straight to the heart of her conflict. "Or is it just the cage you've built for yourself?" He turned to leave, then paused. "We're fighting a war against the end of everything. We need soldiers, but we also need scholars. People who know things we don't. There's a place for you with us. If you ever decide you want to fight for more than just a title." He didn't wait for an answer. He rejoined Rias and the others, and they disappeared in the crimson light of the Gremory seal. Roswise stood there for a long time, watching the spot where they had vanished. His words echoed in her mind. "Is it just the cage you've built for yourself?" She looked at the golden halls of Asgard, a city she had sworn to protect. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a beautifully decorated prison. Her choice, which had always seemed so clear, was now a painful, terrifying, and liberating question. Chapter 6 End.